I just want to read this concept of, for me, what breaking bread is. I mean, everybody kind of has heard that line for years upon years. And it's sharing food. It has been a way for all cultures to create and sustain a bond with family and friends, talk about the day's events, their job, their school with their sons and daughters, a sense of verbal face-to-face communication. And in a sense that has been missed and been replaced with texting, Skyping, you know, the non-verbal, anything to not be confrontational, I think has been missed. And everybody here, I know, I have much admiration and respect for, all the way from the Million Man March, all the way from 89, 99, shortly after, you know, and I got a lot of respect for you guys as men, as what you guys do in the community, and just walking the walk. And so my thought is, let's break bread, let's talk, let's have dialogue, let's say what's on our mind.
Martin Luther King taught something called creative tension. I happen to believe in that.
And define what that is.
It is forcing the contradictions. You know, in his case, between a Christian-centered man is a challenge the Christian community about their beliefs. And he practiced in raw form the Sermon on the Mount, like love your enemy. That ain't easy, you know. And it's very unnatural. He understood that. Is at least as unnatural as aggressive violence. Malcolm X had the correct position, self-defense, which is a declaration against violence. But King taught that these violent, brutal races to face them. That's the contradiction. In fact, contradictions are the principal law of nature, when you think about it. King did that before our very eyes, and there were some advances. The Civil Rights Movement challenged Jim Crow / segregation, which I call white supremacy. All racism is white supremacy that we face. You challenge those institutions. You got some bills passed, the Civil Rights Act of 1964, 65, and 68, which is the first since Reconstruction, when you had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments passed. George Wallace could say, I draw the line in the dust before the feet of tyranny. Segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. This is the governor of a state defending the doctrine of white supremacy. I say white supremacy because that's the part that makes people nervous and full of angst and anger and so forth. That was a brutal thing. Physically, psychologically, spiritually, across the board, was a system of caste. That's what black people live under. Caste, you know, it's hereditary. You can't get out of this. You know, you inherit the condition of your parents. That's what blacks live under. Slavery was more graphic, but segregation was simply a modification of the caste system. African American, to their everlasting credit and courage and bravery, beat that system, not the government. The government responds to a movement. Governments don't initiate movements. The people created this, forced the government to respond, to be responsible to the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment.
Yeah, and I read somewhere just today that 67% of all the hate crimes are still against African Americans.
Yeah.
You know, so you're basically saying 2 out of 3 hate crimes is because of the color of our skin. And, you know, you hear and you have, you know, a large group of us who think we're, you know, better than we were then. And to some degrees, you know, they're absolutely right, you know. But in retrospect, I think that adversity that we as black people had to go through, there was a sense of togetherness that we don't have now.
True.
Well, I would even say that when I look at the killings going on in Chicago, I would call those self-hate crimes. You know, and that is some of the legacy of slavery, segregation, second-class citizenship that we see. But it's hard because there's no one to point at but ourselves. It makes me scared when they talk about the young man in Chicago who they say, if he would have been charged a year prior with illegal gun possession, this young lady never would have been shot. At the same time, if we lock up every young black male who's walking around in Chicago with a gun, unfortunately,
That would be a lot of them. And that's what the one thing that irritated me about the whole
Sandy Hook.
Sandy, Hook situation. And don't get me wrong, by no means am I trying to dismiss what happened, because that's a travesty, period. Any life being taken is a travesty. But to dismiss, like you said, the Chicago killings, and I think, what was it, like within 2 days, there was like 33 killings at one particular point last summer, and then now all of a sudden we need gun control. No, we been needing gun control. I mean, what are you saying? I mean, you got gang members that's been walking around with assault rifles and automatic rifles.
To me,
Why
it says,
now is an issue?
it says that, without really saying it, it says that the value of black life really isn't that much.
That's what it is right there.
And, to kind of piggyback what's said, in terms of the different forms of racism and the different levels, it's real complex, Some of the stuff you're talking about kind of falls under what we would call internalized depression. You have internalized depression, you have structural racism, and you have institutional racism. You have the different institutions, whether it be, FHA, redlining neighborhoods, banks and schools, and then you have how those institutions have engaged whole generations and communities. And then also to be able to frame racism as post-traumatic stress, because, it's definitely stressful, living in these conditions, and for me, coming up, I grew up in the early 70s, to where you still would see, some of the overt racism, but these days, even in terms of the creation of the ghettos and things of that nature, or the cutting of after-school programs during the Reagan era, that to me is my entry point, in terms of the creation of gangs and different socioeconomic disinvestments, to me that is where racism is now. So to say that there's this is a post-racial society is a farce. You're talking about, for example, I was looking at a study that said at one point in time you can get all of the black millionaires together, but still all of the black millionaires still don't, or all of the black bankers still don't even equate to the lowest register of white bankers in general. So you could have black capitalists, but in relation to how wealth is distributed in general, that right there, you're dealing with isolated incidents. So you can have situations, but it's not equity for everyone. And I feel like these forms that we're talking about are a lot more difficult to uncover. The way I look at it is, this is what we deal with every day. And I'm happy that there's a lot of confusion. People are uncomfortable because I feel, kind of going back to what you said about controversy, tension, causing heat. You can't go around it. You got to go through it.
Right.
And to me, I feel like on one level, racism to me is a social construct, but until we can get through that, we still have to address the realities and the pain and the issues, that are here as a result of that construct. So you can't just get to Kumbaya place and holding hands without necessarily going through some of the issues.
When I look at the constructs of what we actually rally around and what we're fighting about, and then I think of the base causes of these things and what we're actually addressing. Like, trust me, I have the deepest sympathy for everybody involved in everything from the shootings in Chicago to, you know, the Sandy Hook shootings and, you know, all the way down to Columbine. However, what I have a problem with is when we go on a tirade and we say we're going to have gun legislation, right? What does that actually solve? I mean, the reality of the matter is the things that have gotten us to the point where we're ready to do something wasn't an act that was committed by a quote-unquote criminal felon with a gun. These were legally acquired weapons. And when they went into their tirade, they used those legal arms and pumped legal rounds into citizens and killed them. But then when it's time to go do something, they focus on criminals. And for me, I have a problem with that because when people think criminal, my face pops up a lot. You know what I mean? And so I have a problem when they propose this as a solution and this is a rally call. You know, so like for me, I'm trying to get down to the root causes. We know and understand that racism functions off of certain disparities. It has to have educational, economic, and social disparities in order for it to exist. Until we have the conversations about breaking down the feeders of racism, I don't really care about all the mumbo jumbo. I'm not getting excited. I'm not going out to protest. I'm not calling nobody to vote down any for or against any legislation. Why? Because we're not serious. This day and time, when I look at these young brothers and sisters, I don't feel like I'm doing my job if I sit and meander around the real point. Because they're not going to be that dumb. They're going to see it right away. And then they're going to look at us and be like, okay, so y'all watched millions of people go into the streets over Trayvon Martin. Y'all still didn't talk about race in the presidential election? What happened? See what I'm saying? Me personally, is about evolution. What are the innovations that we need to make right now, and who's making those? The thing I like about people like Mahmoud, we don't have very many wells of history left in our community that are accessible, that we can just go and talk to. I knew what was up when who was it? Cornell was like, this was one of his mentors, and I was like, hold on, time out. And we see him every day, so we need to take advantage of people like him in order to make sure that we're properly informed on what has already been fought, what has already been tried. We've tried a lot of this stuff. We know first and foremost that we passed legislation about a lot of different things, but we also know that you could pass legislation, but the culture takes a lot longer to change.
That's right.
So the impact that we're going to have, even once we pass legislation, it's still not going to be felt immediately because people are going to feel the way they feel. I also look at what we squander right now. I think in terms of if we're going to look back at what the fighters before us, Fannie Lou, you know, Malcolm and Martin did, they also evaluated the playing field. The boycott on the buses was more so not just about we want respect when we come on your bus. They knew what got white people's attention. They pocketbook. Economics. And it hit them right where they knew they would pay attention. Wasn't gonna be no Christmas bonuses this year because the Negroes weren't riding the bus. We need to get back to things that have that type of impact.
I think one of the biggest problems that we've had, at least in the last 15, 20 years, is we know what we're talking about, y'all shut up, and we already know what we're talking about, we ain't trying to hear you. Coming from two different generations of people. And unless we have this sit down and conversation and everybody feels like they equally can say something.
So,
I'm interested.
yeah.
I want to know, I want to get some of your feedback. Like, where do you see society going in the next 20 years?
Downhill.
Downhill.
Well, Facebook is really somewhere where it's been coming from being like talking to people to being more racist, and then also to being more nudity. I think it's more easy access to be racist through internet than face to face. Cause I mean, I've been invited to some Facebook parties, and then there's this kid that was speaking on what this other kid was saying that was very immature, and then the kid said, well, at least I'm not black, and he was white, and well, that right there, yeah. And then
I think that was really kind of like I had to talk to him. Like I tried to message him on Facebook, like, what were you trying to get at? Like, what was your point? And then this kid that was black, and he like messaged, like he was like commenting, saying like, well, you don't need to like really tell him whatever. And I'm like, well, you're African American yourself, and you're talking about he's your friend, but he basically disrespected you, and basically slapped you in the face. But you're saying, oh yeah, he's my best friend. It's like if you wanna like be adventurous, you have to go and talk to every race and see what they do. Like I have a friend that's Mexican. I went over his house and ate the food and I liked it. And I've been over white kids' houses, ate their food, liked it. I haven't been over Somalia's house. I mean, I'm just saying it's like.
But food is
real. I'm just saying like.
Breaking bread.
I'm just saying like.
That's so important.
You gotta like the food. You gotta start off liking the food. It's easier to be an ass on Facebook
Yeah.
because
I will never see you.
Yeah, I will never see you. You're not gonna kick my butt. I mean, well, like you said, it's been happening more and more because people are, hey, I'll get to you, But for the most part, you can be an ass. You know what I mean? I hate this. I think all white people are this.
Twitter invites you to.
Hit send, go hop into bed, go to sleep, or take a tub, watch a movie.
Wake up, like.
And wake up, look, see your 500 likes and your, 4,000 responses, people calling you out your name. But hey, who cares? It's
you're
not
popular
confrontational. Yeah. and how do we live in this new society?
Yeah.
As far as even going back to what you were saying, galvanizing ourselves behind a leader.
So, on one hand, you had, during the Civil Rights Movement, the centerpiece was the church.
Yep.
Everybody could agree, and like Professor Al-Kathi was saying in the car, it was organized bodies of people. Like the church was already an organized body. And now there's such an overabundance of division amongst people, just first by population size, two by geographic location, and then the amount of information and technology and all these things that make us think that we already know everything.
Yep.
It's kind of like the consciousness of man has made a major shift just in the last 50 years. You know how when a baby's born and it soaks up every little bit of information that comes to it. It's looking at colors and shapes and sizes and everything that it hears, it might regurgitate and say it back. Now you have so much information that you can't even process all of this information. So we need devices and things to help us process information. So to be able to process a concept of racism and process a concept of division when your entire life you've been watching the Disney Channel and everybody hangs out at the same cafe and everything's cool and the president's black, so everybody, so obviously where's the racism at? It's not like in school when you look at the dogs attacking somebody on the street. It's different. We're in a different place. And like our consciousness is different now. Just even in the last 10 years, even the last 15 years, just the fact that all the things that I can do on my phone that I would have had to look for in a book 10 years ago, 15 years ago, or the fact that you can find me anywhere and distract me from doing things that may mean I have to sit at a table and look at your face, or I need to use my hands and create and build something. Like our whole mindset is different. And then there's generations and generations of people that are growing with more and more detachment from physical reality.
30 years ago, it's that recent, the lowest rate of suicide of any ethnic group was African Americans. That's changed. I don't know, how many of you knew that? Yeah. That, it messed up Dick Gregory's act. Remember Dick Gregory, the old comedian? He was talking about the low rate of suicide. He said, we don't kill ourselves, And he said the whole history of the Golden Gate Bridge, 300 people jumped off. Only 2 of them were black, and 1 was pushed, you know. But that's no longer true. That's no longer true. The rate of suicide, and I've encountered this. First black person who did that was a young black person who I know, a student of mine, who blew me out the water, and he was giving me all kind of signals that that was coming. I didn't, you know, with hindsight, you saw it. And I've had several white students who committed suicide. You know, you just look for that every year. One or two are going to do that. That's changing. So something is happening to us. Chemistry, or whatever you want to call it, become more nearly white. Maybe, I don't know. One of the most painful things I experience when I walk around my campus is simply this. You know, is that black students who are being socialized into that environment, they come to school to go to class. You know, it's not a social experience to do good and well in class. They have been so indoctrinated by whiteness, which is not a color, it's a state of mind. It's not being. I can scarcely get one to look me in the eye when you walk across the campus. A white person can look me in the eye, and a black student can't. That's serious. It's back to Ralph Ellison's what? I'm an invisible man. Right? No, I'm not one of your Hollywood ectoplasms. No, I am not one of the ghosts out of the stories of Edgar Allan Poe. I'm a man of substance, of fiber, of liquid, of bone. Might even be said that I possess a mind, but I'm invisible, you understand, simply because people refuse to see me. And these people who refuse to see me are black
Your own
people.
Since when you said that African Americans are native to America, do you think that Native Americans are native to America?
No, they are the natives of America.
And he was talking about African
African
immigrants.
So listen, let's get this straight. This is not now, never has been, and never will be a white country. And that needs to stop. That's foolishness. You know who somebody was here before whoever John Wayne showed up. You know, some people think the country was settled by John Wayne, you know. You're white, that's silly. It's not a white country. I mean, 2 minutes after the Englishman lit in Jamestown, there are 20 African Americans well documented. Since the very inception of this country, as Langston Hughes said, we were in America before America was America, before the Constitution was written and this became a state, before George Washington was born, although he did get a slave for Christmas present at 11 years old. But because it was inherited, and then this is crazy. You shouldn't let white people, the Tea Party and nobody, define this as a white country. They keep saying that. There was a time when that was so, you could understand it when black people lay prostrate. I mean, we were so flattened by segregation. And the great white man, you usually think about that as a Southerner, but it's not all Southern. But they were the most conspicuous racist, mad dog type racist. I'm a white man. I'm free, white, and 21. That meant something, you know what I mean? I'm not a slave, I'm a white, I'm really free. And that stuff's gotta stop. This is not a white country. It never has been. Du Bois answered that a long time ago. Dr. W.B. Du Bois said, when they said it's my country, the Tea Party people say.
Oh.
Du Bois' answer would be to them, well, how came it yours before the Pilgrims landed? We were here. It is here we brought our 3 great gifts and mingled them with yours. The gift of story, of song, of soft-stirring melody, in an ill-harmonized, incidentally, and unmelodious land. The gift of sweat and brawn to beat back the wilderness, fell the forest, and lay the foundations to this vast economic empire 200 years before your weak hands could have done it.
Part of what we have to understand in living in a capitalist society, that everything's to be co-opted, which goes back to thinking at the speed of capitalism in relation to continually thinking of different innovations and radical imagination on par with what is undermining. And so you lace up something and something's being undone, so being in that utopia to me doesn't necessarily exist. Everything is to be co-opted, and we've seen it in our lifetime in terms of the art form that we love, to where it is fed back to us.
Well, you know, it's
Claim.
B.B. King who says the problem is everyone in his audience
It's white.
is white. Where is our connection with the roots
Well,
of the current
well,
music?
that's the appropriation and the ripoff. Whites have the institution to preserve our heritage. We don't. That's what that's about.
But we also have a difficult time appreciating our
Of course,
heritage
because
of the history of undermining.
We are black, and black is bad, no good, and so forth, and too many of us have genuflected to that. I mean, he's got a PhD, honorary PhD, and whites elevate it, absorb it, appropriate it, call it American, which means it's not black. and it goes on and on and on, and black people, not all black people, thank God for Langston Hughes, and people like that who've resisted that. You take them out blues and you go on, you sing them on Broadway, you sing them in a Hollywood Bowl, and you mix them up with symphony so they won't sound like me. You also take them out spirituals and you're gone. You mix me in Macbeth and in Carmen Jones and all kind of swing Mikados and everything but what's about me, but someday somebody's gonna stand up and talk about me, sing about me, black and beautiful, and put on plays about me.
I'm reading this book by Howard Kushner called The Book of Job.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a religious person, but I do appreciate the ideas, as you point out. But one interesting thing is talked about before the mirror was invented or created. People's only way of understanding their standing in the world was in other people's eyes, and how that just struck me. It's just like. So then I think about young black men and how do they look at each other, and how do the teachers look at them, and how do the police officers look at them, and how do they then learn about their value when they're looking in other people's eyes that don't value them.
I've been to prisons as a prisoner. and I've been locked up because of my attitude towards the entire structure while I'm in there. Like, I've been in the hole for weeks, and the people that I see in there, as Mark was saying, there are some very intelligent people in there, but a part of me feels like that's why they're in there. Because an intelligent person is going to make the best of any situation that they're handed in order to survive. That's basic human instinct. Now, what concerns me is, like, there's a part of me, like, I'm a single father and I raised my kids myself. Everything that I've gone through, there's certain things that were nothing more than necessity that I don't pass on to my kids. Okay? I operate as a vaccine for my kids when it comes to certain things, period. When I look at my community, though, there's a lack of self-confidence. Like, a lot of people don't know my background until I tell them. And they look at me and be like, how did you do what you did? And I always let them know it doesn't matter where you've been. It's all upstairs. My mom, the second that I got out of prison, she asked me one question. Now, is this experience going to break you, or are you going to redefine yourself by your means and your terms? And I had to sit and meander that for a while, and I made a decision. And I like to think I made a pretty decent one at this particular point in my life.
All right, so then the last question I would pose,
more
and
confused
I appreciate everybody coming out, breaking bread with your brother. I appreciate it. But so the last question I pose to you guys is then, what next? So how do we make 20 years from now, 2012, part of Black History or the Black History Month, apart from Obama, So let's flash forward 20 years. What can we do right now if we had the power, which we do, as Nick says, we have the power within ourselves. So what can we do starting tomorrow to change things?
I realize if you're lucky, life is long, and learning and education has to continue throughout.
Right.
And we also have young adults who are undereducated, who are maybe even coming out of prison trying to figure out what's the next thing to do, hopefully having had a lesson learned and a shift. So I think we also have to recognize that in order to teach the children, we need some educated adults who are doing that, and we can't write someone off once they're in their 20s and they have made some bad choices and they have limited themselves. Because in my own family, have folks who have made bad choices or different choices growing up and have tried to find ways to repair and redeem and to make changes in their own lives as they get older. And I think that's an important aspect. Is I'm always trying to get smarter and better and know more and challenge myself and grow, make myself tomorrow better than myself today, and recognize that my adult peers have to be in that mentality also. Is not to accept the status quo and be complacent and settle, but to reach out to help others, to bring others along, to take responsibility if we've made it, to help others, bring others along. And that's also the adults in our community that are oftentimes 20-something and feeling like they have nothing left in their life to accomplish. And they don't have the self-confidence and the belief in themselves to say, I can make a change. Life is long. I can still make a difference. I can still make an impact. I can still make something.
They're the only resource that we have. The only natural wealth that any people, culture, group has is children. I remember I was in Kenya, visited some years ago, for a few weeks or whatever, to a friend. And one of the things, I met some of the people who are hard to meet. They call Maasai, tall, graceful looking people. And this is their greeting. Now, I don't mean that every Maasai did this, I'm sure, but it was prominent in the way they greeted one another in the morning. When I meet fellow Maasai, Nick, the first thing I would say is, how are the children?
I appreciate you, brothers, for coming out, taking a couple hours out of your day to come and chop it up, talk about what fire burns inside of you. And all I ask is that and it's on the lines of what Nick was saying. Let's just pay it forward. And,
Appreciate you allowing us to
Yeah, I think
eat
this
your
is a
food,
great
brother.
idea.
Yeah.
Great idea.
Thank you.
Interchange,
Yeah.
you learn.